As we continue to look at the journey of before, during, after, and throughout foster care, today we are focused on after foster care. What happens after? While reunification is often the goal, and adoption also sometimes occurs, as we just discussed, we now want to explore. I'm going to start that again, since we can. We're at the beginning. I'll do it one more time. Welcome. As we continue to look at the journey of before, during, after, and throughout foster care, today we are focused on after foster care. What happens after? While reunification is often the goal, and adoption also sometimes occurs, as we just discussed, we now want to explore what happens to teens who age out. To help us explore this, our next guest is Emily Schmidt. Emily is the founder and executive director of the Crackpot coffee shop located in Mechanicsburg, PA. The Crackpot coffee shop employs and invests in youth aging out of the foster care system over a 9 to 12 month experience. Because of this important mission, Emily has a front row seat to see the challenges and opportunities that youth face after foster care. Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Can you just tell us a little bit about the Crackpot so our listeners know more about it if they're not already familiar?
Sure. The Crackpot is an amazing place that looking back, I had always had a dream to have a coffee shop. However, God had bigger dreams than what my brain could imagine back when I was 12 years old and actually dreaming it. And so the Crackpot is totally over and over again God's coffee shop, God's vision, and and he put it on my heart, and I have felt a lot like David over the last several years, just walking into this, and continue to feel that way every day. But through God guiding and leading me through the process, we have been able to open a nonprofit centered on Jesus. That is kind of our goal, is to be Jesus, not particularly a church, but to be Jesus to our community, and most importantly to the kids that we hire. So we are a nonprofit, faith-based coffee shop that we run and operate like a coffee shop, but there's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes, and that is the program that we work with youth that are aging out of the foster care system. So we do that every day, and we love it, and we never know what the challenges are that are coming, but we just faithfully follow the Lord with each one of our kids that comes in to the Crackpot.
Well, I'm excited about the Crackpot for several reasons. One, I love the mission of what you're doing, and I just love the heart behind your staff, and they just always bring so much joy to the work, no matter what they have going on in their lives. And you have won me over to iced coffee. I am 42.
Cool.
I've never drank coffee.
Look
My
at
entire
you.
life, 3 kids, grad school, couple jobs
That's
all at one time. I
amazing.
never drank coffee.
I didn't know that.
But home sweet home iced coffee is my jam now.
Wow.
And I don't know if it's good or bad.
That's crazy.
I think it's good.
It's
And
good.
It's
It's
so
great.
good. And whether it's good for me, I think it's good for me.
It is good.
And so it's just, so there's a lot of things I love about the Crackpot, but those are 2 I just want to highlight. So how and why do teens age out of foster care? Like what, just big picture, why and how to teens age out of foster care? Why does that happen?
So why that happens is because as kids get older and they get moved more and more, there is more trauma, there's more challenges. Every time a child, from the time that they're young, gets moved to a different placement, it is packing up and moving and going into the unknown. And unfortunately, sometimes the unknown could be abusive, just as abusive as maybe what they originally were pulled out of their home. So every time these kids get placed in a different place, or, you know, this nothing is settled for them. So every time these things happen, it gets harder and harder. And so, of course, they're going to react in ways, they're going to act out in different ways. And so the older that these kids get, the more challenging it is, I believe, for foster parents to bring in kids that are older, because there's more trauma, there's more things that they have to work through. So unfortunately, the older kids get, I have found that the less likely they're going to be adopted, because a lot of people that are looking to adopt want to adopt a child that's younger, that hasn't had as much trauma, that they can work more with and help them. So the older they get, the less likely it is that they're adopted. And this is something that I went through in the process of researching and when I was putting together the pieces, which was a really frustrating time, but I grew probably the most in my faith and understanding and patience during that time, is I really realized, like, whoa, there's so many kids that never get adopted. And I would look at, the sites that we had. My husband and I were approved to be foster parents and kind of go through that. And I realized, like, this is the number, this is the group of kids that need us, and so it all kind of came together. But yeah, they don't get adopted. And then once they turn 18 in the system, basically what happens is they have a choice to stay in foster care. If they stay in foster care, they have to have 30 hours a week, or a lot of places we work with, they have to have like approximately 25, 30 hours of work per week, or be in college, in a school of some kind. And so that enables them to stay in the system until they're 21. But when they're 21, everything kind of gets cut off. They get their stipend, they get their amount of money that they have there with whatever home or whatever group that they're with or county. And then they're on their own. And I think the reality of that really hit me more than I ever thought it would, working with these kids, like seeing how that is it. The door closes and good luck to you.
Right.
Just really shocked me. And talking to other people, adults that have aged out of foster care years ago, and hearing their journey and how they just were dropped off at a college campus and that was it. And I mean, that just... I can't imagine. I had it tough, and I had two parents that were supporting me and helping me keep boundaries and guardrails in place. I cannot imagine not having anyone there, to help with that. But that is the reality of what happens. So there was government funding that extended it till 21. It used to be 18 that they aged out, but now they can stay into the system until they're 21, as long as they're working and they're going to school or something like that.
And is it their choice, 18 to 21? Like, did they get to pick when
Yes,
they
do.
exit out?
They do. And unfortunately, there are a lot of kids that at 18, they have had it. They are sick of people telling them what to do. They've had bad experiences. They have been... at that age, you want independence. You want to start making choices, but sometimes they're so restricted on what they can and can't do. And a lot of it sometimes in these group homes is based on what the other kids you're living with is doing, which is really hard. So when they turn 18, they're like, I'm out of here. I don't care where I'm going. I'm out of here. And then that's where you see a lot of the, homelessness, incarceration, trafficking, that kind of thing, because now they're out on their own. And I have heard stories where, one young woman, she would just spend her day looking for a party to go to so that she would have somewhere to crash on a couch where it was acceptable. You can't just knock on someone's door and say, hey, can I sleep on your couch? But if you can find a party where it's okay for you to just crash on someone's couch. So, to think of like 18 years old, that's what you spend your day. That's your job, is to find a place to sleep every night. It's just mind blowing. So,
and it's evidence, not to belabor the point, we're going to put in the show notes a link to statistics of what happens generally when teens age out of foster care. And we don't want to dwell on that, not that it's not important, but because that story is written, right? Like kids are, just what you said about adoption, that teens aging out, like they're really hard to adopt. There's so much trauma. Like, I think that's all very true. And that's why we're so grateful for places like the Crackpot. And so we'll get into all the statistics. But I do think that it's also incumbent upon us to engage with these youth, and even before and during and after. It's why we're doing this whole project. Because these stories are being written, right? And what does that say, that when you're aging out, you're 18, you could leave a group of people who are created to help you, and you'd rather do it on your own and party shop to find places to sleep than continue in the system. And that's not a full indictment of the system, right? There's trauma involved, as you just spoke to. but it's incumbent upon us to help rewrite that narrative. Like, how can we do this better before, during,
Absolutely.
after, throughout? And so we're hopeful that these conversations will help with that. So, yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, and you just touched on this briefly, but to continue off the points that you were saying about, aging out and not having that support may lead to incarceration or things like that. What are the challenges that those kids face when they're coming out of the foster care system?
I mean, they're facing just the basic needs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the basic needs and the understanding of, I think that the system could do a better job at preparing them for reality. I think sometimes things are just taken care of because it's the easy thing to do. It's like they've got a bed, they've got they've got housing, they've got a bed, they've got food. We're providing transportation for them, but then when they actually are on their own, they're clueless as to, so at the Crackpot, a lot of what we do is, and it is exhausting because I realize just how clueless sometimes they are, just with the basic understanding of like, yes, you might want that, but you can't afford that, right? So like, and there's a lot of talk about like, I tell them all the time, and it's kind of a funny thing, like you're on a ramen noodle budget. You are not on a Red Lobster budget. Like, and just that understanding of if you go to Red Lobster every night, you don't have money to pay your rent. And so if you buy that expensive cell phone, you're going to need somewhere to charge it. If you don't have an outlet to plug it into, then your phone doesn't work. So it's just this basic understanding. And so there's a lot just questioning that in like leading up to when they age out. Like, I believe there's a lot more that can be done. But the challenges are just that, the basic needs, that they struggle with the basic needs. They struggle with just having people, having someone that they can count on, because, a lot of these caseworkers, that's their job. And so it's like, I think in their minds too, it's like, well, that's what they get paid to do. So kind of the beauty about Crackpot is we have these volunteer mentors and a good group of people that are volunteering that want to do it. We're not paying them to do it. And so I think that, for them to kind of see that people actually genuinely care, and ultimately that Christ is the reason that we do, that it's Jesus. I mean, that's the cool thing. And it takes a long time. It is not just providing a meal for someone. It is in the trenches, like in the thick of it with these guys. So, just the basic needs. I mean, just like I said, having parents, having a parent, having a person to help you navigate that is helpful. But when you don't have that, you don't even know where to begin.
Well, when you haven't been trained in a lot of these things over the course of your life by a loving family member, or like, I know even for me going into college, like there were plenty of things I had to learn because I had been dependent on my parents, but they were there to like support me in the midst of that. I can't imagine what that's like to go in to those same circumstances and have to learn all those things on your own and to process through that, which is why it's so great that you guys are there to really help.
And a lot of our kids, like some of them come in and they're like, I know exactly what I want to do for a living. And other ones, you say to them, like, what do you want? Do you know what you want to do for a job? Like, do you know what kind of career? And it's like, I've never really thought about it. I mean, a lot of us kind of knew as we were getting close to graduating what we might want to do. But what I've also realized is they've been in survival mode. They have been just surviving today and worrying about where am I going next? That's is this person going to hurt me? Is this person trustworthy? Is this, they're surviving where, I mean, the cool thing about Crackpot is with a lot of our kids, I get a sense at some point, some of them take longer than others, but there's almost this like, like I can now think about that. Like I can trust these people. And now I can start thinking more about my future, where up until that point, it was just, what do I have to do to get what I want? Or are these people, so so that's kind of a cool thing.
And for youth that like are trying to figure out what they're good at, I feel like a really key part of that is having mentors and other people who see those things in you and are able to point those out. There are some kids that could, figure out some things on their own, but like for the most part, somebody's like, oh, you're really good at writing, you should become a journalist. You're really good at math, you should be an engineer. But if they don't have that either,
Right.
then and also being in survival mode, then
Yep.
that's amazing that you guys give that breath of fresh air though.
And we do
That's really
like job
great.
shadowing. So we say, hey, give us like your top 4 or 5 things that you want to do, and then let's go shadow them.
That's awesome.
And then do the pros and cons of each of them. Because some of the things they don't work about, like they don't think about. One of the young ladies, wanted to do a particular thing, but then we talked about like, well, what kind of environment will that be? Will you be, seeing sunlight during the day? Like, will you be working weekends? Is it, all of these different things? Like, can you see yourself doing that day after day? Because you want to go to a place where you want to be at, because it's going to help you. So we just have these great opportunities, and they're all so cool and so talented and just have so much to offer. It's so cool to be able to work with them.
It's good. Yeah. We often say to our kids, like, we get to go to work.
Yeah.
We don't have to go to work. We get to go to work.
Yep.
And just like even just framing work in that way, that it's a joy that we get to do. I'm sorry to leave you, but I get to go to work. So, when they want to play one more game of dominoes or whatever it is. So usually balloon volleyball right now.
That's fun.
Anyway, it's
The only
a great
kind of
time.
volleyball I play.
Yeah, that's right. But in your conversation with Nate before today, you said when Nate asked, what do teens who are aging out need? You said 2 things that just struck me. You said every child needs an adult who's crazy about them in their life, and then you also said for the church to be involved. Could you unpack both those things? Every child needs an adult who's crazy about them in their life, and they need the church to be involved. Could you talk more about those 2 things?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So I think that everybody needs one person. I think, and it's as simple as that. I think that, I even, you just think in your own life, like if there was, I have a lot of people. I'm very blessed and fortunate that I have great parents that have been there, for me, and grandparents and all of that. But when that's taken away, and even your siblings are taken away. I have wonderful siblings that, we fought as kids and stuff like that, but I know that they're there for me, and I know that they want what's best for me, and that I can always count on them. But when you remove all of that, especially siblings, and that's the thing that probably breaks my heart the most about kids that are pulled out of their home, is that last thread, that last thing that they have when they're separated from siblings. And a lot of the kids that we work with, and a lot of kids in foster care, have a lot of siblings, but they don't even know them. So when you take all of that away, then who can you trust? Like, if you can't trust your parents. So it really takes that one person, just one person with one kid, one youth, that is going to, the important thing is that is going to stick with them and almost treat them like they are a biological child.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to look at kids that are in foster care and say, well, they're not my biological child. But I would ask you, if you're committed to a child in foster care, are you there for them the same way that you would be with your own biological child? I tell my kids, my biological kids, that, no matter what they do, it'll never change my love for them. And, there might be a line that I have to draw that I'm like, I'm not going there with you, and I'm not getting you out of this situation, but I'm always here for you. And I think that sometimes when you are mentoring a youth, you almost have to look at it through those lenses, that like, I am going to be with you come hell or high water. Like, I am in this with you.
That's good.
And so I will stick with you. And so I have said that, and we've been through it with a couple. We have really been through it with a couple. But there was one moment where I was driving with one of them, and it was after a whole lot, years. And I had picked this person up from a difficult location. And I remember driving back, and I after I got done with, you need to, like a parent, but I'm here for you, and I still love you. And they said to me, you know what? I'm starting to really believe that. And I, like, part of me like broke, and I was just like, but part of me was like, seriously, just now you're starting, like, what happened in the last couple of years of me? But it occurred to me that there is years and years of this trauma and this mistrust. So for me to think that in 3 months, in 1 month of taking this kid out for pizza and wings, that he or she is gonna have my trust, that they're gonna trust me, is totally unrealistic.
Yep.
I mean, I think as a mentor, I think as a one-on-one mentor or someone who is working with these people, you have to realize that when you say "I do" to this kid, that you are committing to, as long as they are coming to you, as long as they are with you in your life, that you are committed to them. And that it might take years and years until they say, "I'm just now starting to trust you." Because that's the reality. It's like so much damage has been done. We have to be okay with walking with them at their pace.
That's right.
And being that consistency to them. Because it's, you know, I think I talked to you a little bit about just this unsteady ground that these kids are so used to. And it's almost like going out on like a paddle, like a surfboard or something like that. And they're out in this lake or this ocean, right? And they are climbing and climbing. And every time someone is like, "Come on up, I'll help you up on the surfboard," right? They get up on the surfboard and they're getting their balance, right? And all of a sudden, before they know it, someone comes and just rips that surfboard right out from underneath their feet. And just like that, they're back down in the water and they're drowning. And the waves are crashing and there's sharks and there's all kinds of stuff that none of us like to think about that are in the ocean that are coming at them or could come at them.
I like the ocean, but to look at it.
Yes,
because of those reasons.
But when you get too deep or you think about what's in there with you,
come on.
and that's the world. And so these kids are swimming in this lake or in this ocean and they're trying to get on a solid, steady surface. But every time that has happened in their life, and once they start, maybe they're laying there and the sun's beating on them and then all of a sudden someone flips their surfboard. So that's their reality.
Right.
And so what I think we as Christians at the Crackpot have this opportunity to do is give them a solid, not surfboard, but a really solid rock that they get to stand on. And we know what that is.
It's good.
But like, this is it. No one's ripping this out from you because this is Jesus and this is solider than anything that you've ever stood on. And so we have this opportunity to share that with these kids, but it involves us consistently being there and consistently being filled up by Jesus so that we can be what they need to be, what they need from us to be confident and trusting what they're standing on.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want you to get to the church and why people need, you said the church needs to be involved. I want you to get to that, but let me just do my little pastor hat here. I think that we're connected. We're connected here in this conversation through a journey on foster care. But one of the things I have been so struck by in my time as a pastor here, and I'm the community engagement pastor, so I'm out in the community meeting with local partners and community groups, and like, what are they going through? What are they struggling with? What do they need? And probably the most surprising, consistent theme is Christians are generous. They're just not faithful. Like, we talk a big game and we're generous with our money. We're even generous with our time, but we're here and we're there. And I think that it's so striking to remember, and it's almost funny, like, funny, that God knew what he was doing when he said that we need to care for vulnerable children and look after widows and orphans in their distress and to keep oneself pure and holy before the Lord, and James. And like, I think that God knew what he was doing, not just because these are kids and youth that need investment because they're good and they're created by the Lord and they're loved and they're worthy of our time and our attention, but it's also good for us to grow in faithfulness. Like parenting or co-laboring or mentoring requires faithfulness and helps us grow in character. It helps us grow in a likeness of Christ.
Absolutely.
And so we can't like say like, oh, that's such a good thing. I just love what the Crackpot does, and then not be faithful in our own lives, because that in some ways, like, yeah, I love shopping there and I love buying coffee there. And now I love buying a lot of coffee there in ways that I never thought I would. But I think I'm too faithful maybe there. No, like, I'm not lying. So I think that, but I do think that God knew what he was doing when he calls us to step into these things, because we have to rely on him. And our lack of faithfulness is disruptive in ways that I'm like, well, it's not a big deal. Like, I told him I'd be there, but like, I've got this other thing I need to do, or like a better opportunity came up, or like it's not that big of a deal. But for a kid or a youth who's been beaten down all the time, we are actually in the process of brain surgery. Like we're actually cognitively rewiring their brain to know that people are not to be feared or pushed away, but they are people who can be loved and trusted and who love you. And we are in the business of brain surgery, and we need to be faithful. So I just wanted to I think generally that faithfulness is probably the thing that especially our non-Christian community partners tell me, that Christians are generous, they're just not faithful. How do we be faithful? And mentoring is one of those things. Anyway, so how else why do you say the church needs to be involved? Maybe I'm already stealing your thunder.
No. I think you're exactly right. And I think that first it's realizing I'm reading a great book right now. It's called Dancing with God. A wonderful gentleman wrote it that comes into the coffee shop. Tony Beckett.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a wonderful book. And I'm reading it now for the second time.
Okay.
And
I'll have to read it.
Sometimes rereading something for the second time is just really good. But it's all about taking the invitation that, he talks about a picture. It's a famous picture of like dancing, of two dancers. And then there's the butler holding the umbrella. I'm sure you know. I don't even know. I'm horrible with artists. And that kind
I don't
of thing.
know that one either.
But it's all about we are invited to dance. And so God is leading us. He's the leader. But we are invited to that dance. And so it's just really encouraging you to follow God's lead and go after it. And so I think sometimes you're exactly right. It's that faithfulness of walking into the unknown, and it's not about us. I mean, that's the thing that I realize time and time again is that whatever the Lord is taking me into, and I have just a taste of, I have not fought a Goliath in the sense of the one that David did. But we do. Yeah. I mean, when God calls us to it, he will walk us through it. And so I think that that has been shown time and time and time again, where I feel like, this is not, even opening the coffee shop was a scary thing. But it is all about God, and it always points back to God and his faithfulness and his power and his strength and his wisdom.
Amen.
And so we have this amazing opportunity to be these vessels and to be these servants for him. Right. We're not dummies. We're not puppets on a string. We don't just do. God puts, and God knows the desires of our heart and the gifts and the things that he gave us to use.
Amen.
To serve him. And so when he calls us to it, you have to have faith in him, and you have to remember that our God is mighty, mighty, mighty. And there have been times where we have been thinking about bringing a particular youth into the Crackpot, and a Christian has questioned me on that's a whole lot of stuff that person's might bring in here.
That's right.
And I look at them and I think, almost suggesting that you might not want to do it. And I think, what in the world? Who is our God?
Right.
Is that what you think of our God?
Knowledge
that he
beyond
cannot?
Redemption.
Yes. And so it's not going before him, but it is walking with him into the battle. He fights our battles, and he says that all we need to do is be still, but we need to go into the battle, and we need to go where God's calling us. I think that there's a little bit of getting behind, and I think it's easy to write a check. And don't get me wrong, we need the funds.
You do need
it.
and they are
the funds.
worthy of your investment.
You totally need the funds. But I
Yeah.
also think that sometimes
That's right.
that tugging on your heart to pull your sleeves up and to get down in it and to look at our brothers and sisters in the Bible and what they endured and the time. You think of Moses and the time and the faithfulness of his journey. And then he didn't even get to see
That's right.
what he longed to see.
For its faithfulness.
But God used him
That's right.
in that mighty and powerful way. And all these generations later in our lives
That's right.
to be a lesson to us. And that's really what it's about, is the journey and going where God's calling us. It's not about us. It's not about us. It's about God for the time that he's going to use us to further his kingdom.
Yeah.
And I
that's right.
think that I think sometimes having that time and having that faith in the Lord that he is so mighty and so powerful and that he can get us through whatever it is. And sometimes it's really hard coming alongside of youth. I will tell you that they are one of the devil's number one targets.
That's right.
Because who better to prey on than people that are broken and looking for power?
That's right.
Well, here's some power. You know, it's not freedom. It's not freedom. It's, I'll give you this power, but you got to give. That is a puppet on a string. You know, whereas you are a slave versus serving the Lord, you are a servant. And so I see a lot of that with our youth is this enslavement to the devil. And so we have to rise up as the church. We have to rise up and fight with these kids and for these kids.
Yeah.
So much, so much. I just can't express the amount of fighting that we have to do, even if we don't know them. I mean, praying over these kids. There's so many times where I'm overwhelmed at home. I think about kids that are in abusive situations right now. I want to kick open the doors of houses and rescue them, but I can't. I mean, I could.
No, then you'd be arrested. And
But what can I do? I can
right.
fight. There's a song, Fighting on My Knees.
That's
you know,
right.
it's like that is what we can do, but also
right.
going and listening to God's calling and walking faithfully with him and knowing that he's fighting the battle is what we really need to do as a church now more than ever.
Yep.
This is our time. This is what we're made for.
That's amen. And just as a reference to our listeners, viewers, Exodus 14 is just such a powerful chapter in the Bible. And that's where the reference that you're making that Moses is saying to the people, you know, the Lord will fight for you. You need only be silent. Or some translations say you need only be still. But then God says then, but get up. Like, what are you doing sitting there? Like, I'm going to deliver you. And, you know, the Egyptians are coming and like the Red Sea parting and like they have to go through, they have to go into the water and they have to, by faith, step into the water and then it opens up. And so, but God can only do that, but we have to trust in him and get on our knees and pray and he will deliver us. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be silent. That's what I think about sometimes when I'm just like dealing with especially kids or teens who've gone through trauma. And I'm like, I don't even know where to begin.
Right.
And I just remember that verse like, well, I'm here.
Right.
And there's no way I can part this Red Sea. There's no way I can calm this ocean, but I know who can.
Right.
And I'm just going to be faithful to trust in him and live like that. Anyway, so.
One more thing before we go into the next question. I know in our pre-production conversation, you had mentioned this and I was really impacted by it. Just along with the being faithful idea and that we need to increase in that, you were talking about how we often settle or expect like quick solutions. And you were like edging onto talking about that earlier, but no.
Cutting ahead.
Hey, you did great. You did great. I just wanted to add to what you were doing with your own words. Yeah, so I think we're looking for quick and easy solutions so that we can pat ourselves on the back and be like, oh, well, that project's done. Check.
Yeah.
I can make myself feel better about that. But these kids aren't like that, obviously. But then I think we also need to take a step back and realize, when were we like that? And this was, you said this isn't my words, but you were saying like, when were we like that? And what was God in relationship to us? And how long has he waited? How long has he endured and just been present with us through the various ways that we mess up throughout our lives, the ways that we don't deserve his love, but he continues to bring it to us. And so for our listeners, like that's something to, I think, put ourselves in those shoes as well and realize like, okay, do I have any, biases coming into this that I would want a quick solution? Am I looking for that kind of a thing so I can check that off? Or am I willing to really stand the test of time with these kids and really be present with them and be proximate?
Yeah. And I think that, there's so much I'm thinking about, and it's just, there's so many kids that we've worked with, and there's so many times where I and our team who love and care about all of our kids so much, we get discouraged. I call it like a spiritual funk.
Right.
You get into this like this is not going the way that I wanted it to go. And this is not, this person was taking 3 steps forward and now is self-sabotaging and they're taking 5 steps backwards. And it's, and then you take that personal, and there's so many times where I'm like, Lord, there's so many times where in this journey I have questioned like, Lord, am I even making a difference? You know what I mean? Like, is this even, there's so much energy, so much time, so much that I'm doing here. And you just see these little tiny bits of things here and there, but nothing. So it's just, and God always shows up. You know, I hear a sermon in church or someone will say something to me that's like gives me confirmation that yes, you are. And he's so good like that. We're not going for a microwavable kind of thing. You know, we are not doing, it's not a factory where we're just popping things together. We are harvesting. You know, we are going where God, and that takes time, and it takes God's timing, and it takes patience with these kids. And again, understanding that the stuff and the trauma and the hard parts about these kids and working with them did not happen overnight. It took years. So again, I think setting realistic goals when you're working with these kids, that this is gonna take some time, you know, to really help them to grow their roots deeper and realize that sometimes you might not even see it. And I think that's the hardest part of what we do. And the most discouraging part for me is not getting to see you know, have a kid that, you know, they move away and you're right in the middle of like all these great things about ready to happen and you're working on their team and all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm out of here. I'm moving back to, you know, wherever, Lancaster or whatever. And you're like, you know, what was that? Like, what was all that for? And that's where I think we have to be okay, again, with being seed sowers and realizing that it is not about us, that it is about the Lord and being there in that moment in time for whatever reason it was. And again, you see that over and over in the Bible, how there was that one person who impacted, you know, someone in the Bible just in that scene that made a huge difference. And I'm going to share this. Actually, one of our pastors shared this in a sermon, and it was one of the times that I was in a spiritual funk, and I came into church, and I just was so discouraged. And I might cry. I'm just going to warn you because I do, and this might make me cry.
That's most people cry.
So
when they
just
talk
so
to
you
me.
know,
It's fine.
okay. So
our team can attest to that. Yeah.
He said in his sermon, the one Sunday I was having a tough Sunday, the thing that he shared was that there was a pastor, a Sunday school teacher. And he taught Sunday school every day, you know, all these little Sunday school kids. And you know, he just got to a point where he was getting discouraged and he just felt like, you know what? I don't feel like what I'm doing is making any difference. And so he ended up quitting. He quit and he stopped being a Sunday school teacher because he's like, it's so much time, it's so much energy, I'm just going to be done. And so what happened was there was one of his kids, one of his boys that was in his Sunday school class who back then in Sunday school, his life changed. I think he accepted Jesus and his life changed, I think, after this guy. Like he planted the seed that then turned into him accepting Jesus. And this now man was on his deathbed. He was dying of whatever he was dying from. And he asked his best friend, he said, can you please, like one of his last words was, can you please find Mr. whatever, the Sunday school teacher, and please tell him that that he made such an impact in my life. And so this friend went and found the Sunday school teacher after he passed away and said, I just want to let you know that my friend just passed away and that he wanted me to let you know that you made such an impact in his life that the whole rest of his life was changed because of what you did way back then. And here's this Sunday school. You're crying. Look at you. I'm holding it together.
You're holding it together.
So here he is standing on this front porch at the Sunday school. And the Sunday school teacher is saying, holy cow, I gave that up years ago because I didn't think it was making any difference. And I heard that Sunday, and I, of course, I'm not now, but was just crying, and it stuck with me, and it still sticks with me because that is what we're called to do. And we are called to wake up every day and do that, and we don't need to know the outcome. We don't need to know what God's doing. We just need to faithfully walk and serve him in whatever moment or capacity he has us in that day, which is really hard. It is really hard, and I struggle. But it's going back to the Lord to be refilled and laying it down and saying, Lord, give me what you have for me today. And sometimes that looks entirely different than what's on my calendar for that day. But it's good and it's rich, and I know that it's following him.
Just to put a little bow on that, there's this concept that you might have heard about called the orphan spirit. And we'll put it in the show notes. I'll try to find some research about it. But every kid goes through that, like 18 to 24. Who am I? Whose am I? What is the shape of my life? But that's particularly true through teens or kids who have experienced trauma, foster care, kids who have been adopted, even if they were adopted from birth, like just this general sense of like, who am I? Whose am I? And through that period, the seating is something that will yield later, and people will look back on that time after 24 and cognitively look back and like, who cared about me? Who was planting good seeds in my life? But in the midst of that, you don't see any of that. And so there's a lot of global research and child psychology research on this thing called orphan spirit that all kids go through, but particularly kids who have gone through hard things. And so I just really want to affirm you that that's one of the things when I first heard about what you're doing, I was like, wow, like, first of all, that's awesome. And second of all, that's going to be hard and you won't get to see the fruits of that till later. But because you're willing to do it anyway and not get that instant gratification in a microwave world, like, come on, like that preaches truth. And one of my favorite verses is Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Like, we know that this is good. We are certain that this is good. And we even don't get to see that, but we still do it anyway. And all of Hebrews 11 is about people who just sowed seeds of faithfulness and didn't get to see the fruits of that. But it was still worth doing because it was pleasing to the Lord. And so I know we have other questions, but I just want to say to all of our listeners and our viewers, like, thank you for being faithful. And you don't know, I know some of the youth and got to know them a little bit and not nearly the extent of you, but I know that even those who have left you and are on to other things, like, you have sowed good seeds and you can't make it rain. Like, you can't do those things and you don't know the timing, and every seed is different and it blooms at different times. And so just thank you for your faithfulness.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's encouraging.
So now we'd love to transition into talking about, we talked a little bit about what the Crackpot does, but what some of the other organizations in our area are doing as well, and kind of the crossover there and just the whole environment. So who are the local organizations working with teens aging out, and what do they do to support them?
So we, when we first started, it was like really just putting the pieces. I can remember just way back in the beginning, like, what do we do here? And really just figuring out, like, what are the things that we need? What are the needs for these kids that are not being met? And where do we go for that? So we have had, since we opened, some really, really great organizations have come forward. One of the biggest things that I have always felt that there needed to be more of is housing. Housing for these youth that are aging out, where there's a sense a little bit more of independency, but that they also have an adult nearby. They also have some kind of structure and boundaries and guardrails within where they're living, so that they can learn how to be empowered and independent and confident. And so we have partnered with, and we love the Bethany House there in Carlisle. So they're housing for young ladies. The Launch Pad is also in Carlisle, and they're for young men. And all of these people, especially those two places, have been caseworkers. They are very knowledgeable about the system, foster care system, have either been in the foster care system themselves. So they're very knowledgeable about what is needed. And some of them have just quit their full-time jobs as caseworkers because they're like, enough. Yes, they're amazing. And just, they're like, let's get to work.
You are way overqualified to do what you're trying to do.
Like, let's get because they're like, let's make a difference. Like, we're sick of just filling out papers. Like, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. So there's also the Dream House. There is Houses of Hope. There's a lot of great housing that is popping up for kids that are aging out that is really exciting. And we work a lot with New Hope Ministry. We love New Hope Ministry. They do amazing and wonderful things for everybody. But they have come alongside of and have helped our youth a lot. They're wonderful, wonderful. And then other places, like we work with a driving school, Drive Right in Boiling Springs. They work with us on like driving classes. That's one of the big things that was a shocker to me when I first started this was the fact that kids don't have anywhere to practice driving. They get their permits, but then their permits expire because no one wants to let them use their car to practice on.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do they do? I couldn't believe that, like, there's no answer to that. So that's one of the things. And there's other bigger things that I want to work on to really have places that are available to these kids to use safely cars to go out and practice. Because if you don't have transportation and you're going to get a job and they ask you, do you have transportation, then you might not get the job. So it's just the basic things like that, that God keeps revealing and showing us more and more, different places to kind of partner with. We are kind of selective over who we partner with because we don't have a lot of time. Our time is precious. And so it's like, if it's not something that is really going to be beneficial to our kids and that kind of thing. But yeah, and I would say just working with their caseworkers. We work a lot with the United Methodist Home, just with the kids that live there and stuff like that. So just working closely with the caseworkers and having good relationships with them to kind of work together as a team. We love In Him Christian Wellness. They provide therapy for our kids. They are amazing, amazing group of people that have just a really great holistic, just God-centered, fun approach to therapy. So we have partnered with them and we use them when we need them personally. And thank the Lord for that.
Thank God for therapy.
Yes, thank God for therapy is right. So they're awesome. But that's just a few. But yeah, God has provided every step of the way, just wonderful. And it's funny, just a lot of them have the same heart for the mission and stuff like that. So it's really, really neat to see how God's provided.
Amen.
Yeah.
And just in our last couple of minutes here, how can our listeners and viewers get involved? And I know you had mentioned to us that maybe you put together a list of things that we can put in the show notes that people can just read through and listen through. But if you could just list a few of those ways now, how can people help advance the cause of coming alongside youth aging out of foster care?
So the first thing I'm going to say is not money. It's actually prayer.
It's great.
Prayer.
They do need money.
We do. That's number two.
Yeah,
That's number two.
Yeah.
So number one is prayer.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how much the prayer has helped us. We are constantly, I think I shared with you that, the kids we work with are one of the number one targets for the enemy. And so when we go after them just as hard, maybe harder than what he's going after them, and love them in a good and true and real way through Jesus, he comes after us.
Yeah.
And so when you come into the shop for your home sweet home, it might look pretty calm, but there might be a battle raging going on that happened the day before that we're, and our staff, Katie and Danny and the staff there, they're incredible. And they are the warriors on the front line, just fighting the battles every day. So praying for our team is huge every time and any time you think of it. Praying for our kids is really huge because they are the ones that are, as they grow their roots, as they start down a path and a journey of doing what's good for them and experiencing the love of Jesus, he comes after them even harder. And so we are constantly under attack. One of the ways that going back to the church, a lot of people are like, I don't have the time to be a mentor, that kind of thing. One of the ways that people can help, and I would really encourage all the listeners, is we actually have the first Friday of every month. It's called our First Friday Youth Prayer and Praise Night at the shop. And so this is a really cool night that we have dedicated to, we have worship night every night, every Friday night we have live worship. But this particular Friday is dedicated to our kids. And so we actually read off the name of every single one of our kids and spend about 30 seconds on each one of them, really covering them in prayer. So that is a huge way. Cool. It's 30 minutes, one time a month, pop by the shop. I believe in the power of prayer. And so I think just coming alongside of us and coming together as a church there on that property to pray over. And if the kids are there, we try to bring them out, lay hands on them and pray over them. So there's really no excuse, to just pop in before or after dinner at 6:30 and just be a part of that because it's our job. It's what we're called to do. And that's a very simple way of not committing to a lifetime or mentoring, but like just that short amount of time. Joining our prayer team. That way you're getting updated newsletters on how to pray specifically. There's times where we really need it in that moment. And I will call the prayer leader and say, we need prayer right now for this person, no details. And it is amazing.
Yep.
Within minutes.
That's right.
God just answers those prayers because we know our prayer warriors are praying for us. So prayer is the number one thing as often as you think of it.
That's great.
Financially supporting us, obviously, is something that is super helpful to us. We have that. Any donations that are made go directly to our youth, to the people that work with our youth, the therapists. We're trying to look for a program youth director that will be paying that person full time to come alongside and really be overseeing that whole program. So there's that. But just really, any donation goes to little or big things, whether it's helping them, get some furniture for their apartment or paying their driving courses or therapy. So those are some huge ways. And then other than that, just, volunteering, coming into the shop and being a volunteer, being along shoulder to shoulder to our kids and just working behind the counter. Sometimes they actually have these really neat relationships that start with a volunteer and they end up getting really close with that volunteer. So yeah, I think that those are all some really great ways. Obviously, patronizing the shop and finding your favorite drink and getting it often is always very helpful to us.
I like your chai tea.
Yeah, the chai.
Our
Our chai is the best I've ever had.
Oh,
it
it's
really
so
is. I
good.
say that all the time. But no, so just getting involved, being
Thank you.
involved on social media and knowing what's coming up and being a friendly face. And our youth love getting to know our customers and interacting
do.
with them. And it's really neat to see all that. So
They do.
yeah.
They do. And well, just thanks so much. And and we love to just briefly touch on a key takeaway from our time. You said so many things that are just truths that I'll be thinking about and ruminating on, not just today, but the days to come. And so my takeaway, to give Nate a time to think, is you said something like, I tried to write it down, when God calls us into it, he will help us through it. And I just think that resonates so much. It's just such a good reminder of the number one thing I've learned in all of my work working with vulnerable kids, and I've probably shared this already on the podcast, I can't remember, but it's probably the most impactful thing, is God doesn't ask us to be God. He asks us to be faithful. He will be the one that carries you through and shows you the way to go. And in doing so, you remember, oh, wow, look at what God has done. You never can take credit for any success because really it's too big, too hard. And he will carry you through. And that was just a good reminder to me as I start my week and whatever God has for us today. So, yeah, thanks. How about you, Nate?
Yeah, one of them is actually we didn't talk about yet in this conversation. The other one is one we've talked about. But the one from our pre-production conversation was just a reflecting question that you had asked for our listeners is, where is our energy being spent? Is it trashing the foster care system and its flaws or doing something about it? And I think, we can talk about the crisis, we can talk about the problems all day long, but if we're not doing something to solve it, whether it's prayer, whether it's mentoring, any of these things that we've talked about today, then we're doing it wrong, and we need to take action. And then the other thing was when you said that we have to be okay with being seed sowers, not being God. Those along with what you said, and then we just need to faithfully serve where He has us each day. And asking the Lord to give us asking Him, Lord, what do you have for me today? And being willing to just take on whatever that is. And those were all really impactful to me. I'm also a visual learner. So the ocean and lake metaphor idea, that was really a powerful metaphor that I think will stick with our listeners as well as me. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. And we just so appreciate it. And I know you'll see me at the Crackpot. You'll see him.
Yep, I'll be there.
Just love for people to do that and join us. And so today, as we've been talking about, we've been looking at what happens after foster care. And the next episode, we're going to look at throughout. How do we help families before, during, and after, just throughout the whole foster care journey, the spectrum, through support teams and training and investing, because it's a journey and we need to walk along this. We can't call people into this and not say hey, I'm gonna swim with sharks with you. I'm gonna teach you how to swim. I'm gonna swim sharks with you. Whatever you need, I'm gonna be there with you, and we're gonna journey together. So how do we walk alongside families throughout? How do we walk alongside with kids and bio families and teens and everyone throughout? So that's what we're gonna talk about next time. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.